All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry. Today, we're joined by someone who is more than changing how marketing in cannabis is being done. He's rebranding the entire industry's impact, not only on this country, but on the world. John is the CEO and co-founder of PufCreativ, an award-winning agency that has cleaned up at the MJ's International Cannabis Awards, AdCan, the Clio Awards. But if you ask John, I think the accolades are secondary to, the mission. Raised in a family of trailblazers, I think John learned early on that business is a vehicle for social change. And after witnessing the devastating toll of the opioid crisis firsthand, entered the cannabis industry with a singular goal to prove that this plant can be a force for health, wellness, community building, and community healing. From launching PufCreativ Cares to co-founding the Cannabis Impact Fund and Cannabis Doing Good, John has spent more than a decade ensuring that social equity and philanthropy are the backbone of the work. He's a strategist, project management expert, a skater, surfer, member of Bubala, a tireless advocate for authentic storytelling. John, appreciate you being here. Welcome to Inside the Industry.
Kev, I wish I had you to introduce me to everything in my life for the rest of my life. That was awesome. Thanks, man. You make me sound way cooler than I am, that's for sure.
If anybody just even heads over to the Instagram, you do not need me to show how cool you are, trust me. I think it's pretty evident. It's pretty evident. I know you've been on, the podcast kind of circuit many times, and I know some people may know the what and the how of PufCreativ. But, again, surfer, skater, playing a jam band. So, today for Inside the Industry, I wanted to talk about how, those rhythms of those different environments, the ocean, the pavement, the stage, actually dictate how you show up, how PufCreativ was created, and the role that they play in how the business operates. And also, want to talk about the who, obviously, the philosopher and the person behind PufCreativ. So, with that, as we kind of open up the conversation, with all the different things that you're into and been involved in, how did that kind of help form the basis of PufCreativ and just your philosophy behind the work that you do?
Sure, man, that's a deep one. First of all, you said my band name right, which is like, you got 1,000 points right there, my friend. The other thing is you mentioned, I figure this is worth saying, but you mentioned the podcast circuit, and what the reason for that is I do want to be a thought leader and share information, and that's great, but also like a majority of my business is all online. Like I don't do like outbound sales or anything. And what I see is that if you're running a strong marketing platform and you get on podcasts and you become a thought leader and you have media and different networks talking about you, that's what gets you to the top of Google search and those AI recommendations now that are like the future of search. So any hustlers out there, get on the podcasts, start being a thought leader. It's the future. There's no way around it. But that being said, I think your question is just like, how and why do I have so many moving parts, and like why was I crazy enough to like start this agency and get into the industry? So yeah, I mean, it really goes back to like how I was brought up. Like both my parents really like come from nothing. Like my dad was like homeless at one point, and he and my grandfather they started their own construction company because they were forced to. And, randomly my dad fell into an opportunity to get into nightlife. And he's been in nightlife for the past 50 years now. Was just starting when he was like 26, just out of like necessity. And, my dad and mom met through, that business journey, but my mom actually had childhood cancer. So throughout my entire life, my parents always emphasized the importance of taking care of like your own people who, your employees, your family, people who help you get to where you're at, but also connect with community. And so, eventually like my mom ended up starting like her own nonprofit, and they always leveraged their businesses to give back to the community, but also take care of, their staff and create this culture that people want to be around. And so I always felt like growing up, it was like almost like a destiny of mine to like do my own thing, right? Like I feel like a lot of times like it was expected of me to just like jump onto what my parents were doing and like help my mom with her nonprofit and, help my dad with his businesses. Like I used cannabis at, a younger age and was always judged for that. It impacted my life in a lot of ways, like mentally, just like people not being allowed to hang out with me. And simultaneously, like, a little bit later in life, I lost a lot of friends to opiates, like you mentioned. And that was really the straw that broke the camel's back to get me into cannabis. And it took my first cannabis job where I kind of learned everything that happens from seed to sale and then really screwing me over right before I got married. That led me to doing my own thing and forming PufCreativ. And since I started, it really was, the opiate stuff that broke the camel's back. But through my journey, like I've learned how cannabis can help people in just so many ways and how many lives it touches. And so now I kind of have gotten my hands into, every aspect of the industry from, social equity to social justice to environmental to alternative wellness and education. And, it's been a really wild ride. But the other side of that is like, I feel like I always wanted to do my own thing so I could like control my life a little bit more, right? Even though I work more than most people I know, actually. I have all these hobbies and stuff, but like I'm putting in, on average, like probably 9 to 10 hours a day. And I'm also working weekends too.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize that like I literally am on probably 7 to 9 calls per day. And then I can't get anything done. So then once I get my kids to sleep and I work out, then I'm back on my computer from like 9 or 10 till 1 a.m. And then my son wakes up because he's 2. Then I'm so I'm like barely sleeping, but, I make it work because I discovered, through this kind of entrepreneurship journey and having so many hobbies that the way that like my ADHD works and probably why I always enjoy cannabis was that my brain needs chaos to slow down. And so that's why like I'm a surfer, I'm a skater, I'm a drummer who sings. I need to be in these like very chaotic moments in order for me to like reach like inner peace. And so it's such a priority of mine to always be on that mission of like the next wave, the next PAL day, the next live show, prioritizing band practice. And like, even though I'm like working so many hours, it took time for this, but my wife and my family really understand how those things like make me who I am and make me able to deal with the chaos of like running a company with like a bunch of clients and a bunch of people working for me and doing events and give backs and nonprofits. Like it's this whole kind of like science chemistry that needs to happen with me at a personal level for me to like be there for my family, be there for my team, be there for my clients, be able to talk on like public podcasts and stuff like this. And so it's really a flow state that I think that every human has and can achieve. Regardless of me being in that flow state, like it's still like just a lot, and so I always question myself of like, how bad would it be if I wasn't doing those things that like really help me release in some type of way? The other side of that is that I used to, before kids, like I used to drink and I, partied pretty hard, to be honest with you. And, it's been about 5 years since I've had a drink or, any drugs outside of cannabis. And so I think that actually really has helped me be able to balance so much as well, because I can work out at 9 o'clock at night, any night.
Yeah.
I can go be social. I can get back from an outing and then still do a 30-minute workout at 10 p.m. if I wanted to, because I feel good. My wife's asleep, my kids are asleep. Like, why not? I'll work out, meditate a little bit. I can actually think for a second. So, I feel like if I still was in my old ways, like I wouldn't be able to squeeze in those little things that like really make a difference for me for that kind of marathon that I'm on. So,
yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I hear you, man. I hear you about finding, the peace and the clarity and the chaos. I mean, right now I have like 4 monitors. I'm on that ADHD. Like I said, my son's autistic. There was a through line in as he was growing up, he's a teenager now, but as he's growing up, I noticed things like people were saying that he's on the spectrum, but that seems perfectly normal to me because I used to do that. Oh, okay. All right. So now I'm starting to kind of understand some aspects of myself. But to your point about finding the clarity in the chaos and the peace in the chaos, and being able to find not only personal but professional environments that understand how you need to function so that you can be successful and you can show up as your best self is paramount. And it's dope that you've been able to find that in both aspects of your life, because then you don't have to worry about the conflict that comes when you don't have that. You know what I mean?
That's true. It's a lot of work to find that
Yeah.
place and like to maintain it. And I try to encourage it for like all my staff too. And like, you know, it's like such a critical part of life, like to find that balance, but it's always a struggle and it's hard work to be balanced.
Yeah. And, you know, even with that balance, I know that, you know, with PufCreativ, as it continues to grow and scale, and even again, like some of the other things that you've mentioned, how do you ensure that John doesn't become the brand, but that you're able to center the mission, and that remains the brand? Like, how do you kind of protect, because I know you're involved in so many things, how do you kind of protect your own identity in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really been a struggle for me, like since the beginning. Like, I naturally just kind of fell into like, John's the guy over there. You know, obviously I'm like the CEO, you know, I'm doing all the business dev, I did all the sales and stuff like that. Um, I would say that it's really hard. I can't ensure it. I always work towards it because like a big goal of mine is for the business to function, you know, without me as like involved or without me being the face. And I actually, right around when I had my first child, like really tried to step back from that. Like didn't want to go speak at events, like didn't want to, you know, go into, you know, be on podcasts or like be on some type of circuit, I guess you call it. But when I stopped doing that is when we kind of stopped being as relevant and top of mind, I think, for people in a lot of situations. And so as much as I'm leaning into being a thought leader and like, you know, you being on panels and like being on podcasts, I'm also simultaneously like finding ways to like really leverage like my team as a whole, which I've never really had the chance to do in the past. Like, for example, like Chelsea on my team, who you work with on your projects, she just won Marketer of the Year, which is just like, you know, she's not even like on, you know, she's a director and has been here for a long time, but she, you know, she's not on like our executive team. So for someone like that on their team to like beat out the top thought leaders who I'm speaking with and, you know, competing against, you'd say that's a big deal for us. And that's honestly, like one of the biggest achievements for me personally is her winning. She was like my intern years ago, you know. And so another thing with that is like I have her and like Cam, who is another intern of mine who now leads our entire business development and sales department. And then our director of strategy, like they're all now applying to speak on panels and be a part of it. As much as, you know, I think it's great for me to be a part of that, it's cooler for me and more rewarding that now I have the opportunity for like the other leaders and folks on my team to like shine. And that eventually will get me out of that role. Because essentially, like, you know, I'm really great at that stuff, but I'm really good at thinking long term. And so now that I have people that can slowly help me fix a lot of the short term gaps or add quality to those gaps, I can, you know, start, you know, breaking down barriers with additional business development, or just be there for the right issues to fix internally when those come up. Because I'm just all about lessons learned. You know, I know it's like a hard concept in this day and age, lessons learned. That's like, you know, I will admit to mistakes and like take ownership of like things that my team or someone does wrong. But my biggest thing personally, and that I always mention to like my team, and I just had this conversation with actually Cam today, was like, you know, this is a tough situation. Main goal is to learn the lesson that we need to learn from this situation, not maybe keep the client or maybe not, you know, putting a bad taste in someone's mouth. We want to keep the client, not to put a bad taste. Main goal is the lesson. So how do we get here? How can we avoid this in the future? Because when you're running an agency specifically, it's just time. It's all time. How do you utilize that time properly? And the more lessons you learn, the more time you save, and the more you avoid conflict or confrontation. But it's inevitable. Like right now, I mean, I'm sure you deal with it some way. Like people aren't doing well. Money's tight. That causes friction in conversations and relationships when you provide a service, or you're working for someone that is running a company. Fortunately, I got to deal with both, running the company and being a service provider. But I signed up for it, so
Yeah, yeah, and it's working out. It's working out. I mean,
yeah, for the most part, more wins than losses. So I'll take that too.
yeah, and I mean, I think you brought up something really, I think, crucial in that there's a level of trustworthiness that you've engendered with your team, and that you're able to say, you can take the reins of this. I don't have to be involved with this. Or I can trust that whatever we do in terms of collaboration, because we're on the same page, because you've been given the space to grow, to experience wins or losses, to have those lessons learned, we're going to contribute to the greater success of the whole that we are. And I think, I want to touch on like your involvement in your band. You have to listen as much as you play, especially when you're in like a jam band. Like you have to be able to play off each other. You have to be able to improvise. You have to be able to collaborate, like literally in the moment on the spot. Because if somebody goes off on a tangent, you're like, all right, I need to be able to follow them as a drummer. I need to be able to follow them. I need to be able to lead them back in, whatever the case may be. You have to pivot based on what other people that you're working with are doing.
Oh my God, that's so true.
Because like with the industry, I mean, even beyond Puff, but with the industry as a whole, do you feel like the industry is more like, and maybe even with PufCreativ, do you feel like it's more of a composed piece of music that you have to kind of sit and collaborate on, or is it like a 20-minute jam session? Like, how do you teach a brand
it's exactly how like I write music. There's structure and there's not, right? So I think that like as an agency, you need to be in a flow state to execute properly and grow. But there's a lot of improvisation that comes with that as you adapt to your competitors, as you adapt to the industry as it changes. Industry as a whole, it's the same thing, right? Like the industry kind of hits these flow states of rules, regulations, like states maybe are all coming online or not coming online all at the same time. But as more states come online and the more the federal government, has weird posts about CBD and stuff like that, it makes you question a lot. Right? Like my thing is that I do actually feel like at the moment, cannabis specifically somewhat has been and is in a little bit of a flow state at the moment, but that's gonna shake up here soon. And I'm a little bit nervous about, getting the federal government involved, because that brings a lot of people to the table who could impact the folks who really got the industry to where it is now. And also the realization of that, this is at the end of the day, and this is a big thing that's forgotten in the industry, is that it is alternative wellness. Like the main reason we're all here is so people can consume something and it impact their life in some type of positive way. That's going to get lost, I feel, if there's way too much involvement from like bigger companies like big pharma, alcohol, tobacco. It's a little bit, that's what makes me nervous. And that's where the improvisation is going to need to come in with, folks like ourselves.
Yeah. And, even mentioning like other entities like, tobacco, like alcohol, like pharmaceutical companies coming in, when you're working with a brand, somebody similar to us, knowing that cannabis in and of itself is sometimes considered a subculture, and sometimes there's overlaps with how a brand may want to enter a subculture, like with a pharmaceutical company coming into cannabis, how do you position them to be like a welcome guest that's more like adding value rather than like the invasive species just trying to extract money? Like we can see some of these outside entities that are trying to come into the industry based on, the changes in scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's more of like a practice what you preach type of situation, right? Like I want to say that a lot of brands that we work with, including you guys, and brands that we build, and most of our clients, maybe not everyone, has really good intentions. And I think that those intentions need to be infused into the ethos and identity of a brand. And that's what's really going to create that connection with the consumer and your customers, but also the businesses that you work with. And if it's inevitable that there's certain players that are going to be in the industry that you kind of don't have a choice to collaborate with, you might as well create some harmony and show what's possible when you can work together. And the other side of it is that you might have an opportunity to show those, companies that maybe don't have the same intentions or the best intentions. There's another way, right? There's this situation that always stuck out to me. My wife went to law school, and she went to an environmental law school in Vermont. And there was one of her friends or two of her friends, or I forget, but they took their first job was taking on counsel at ExxonMobil, and people were like, "What? Like, why? Why would you do that?" And they're like, "Well, wouldn't you want me, the environmental attorney, to be the one who's helping inform decisions and making change at that company who's destroying so much?" And so that whole perspective actually changed a lot for me in terms of like collaborating with, people who maybe, don't have the right intention. A lot of people have the ability to change heart and mind. And I think that gets lost with a lot of the division that happens, with everything going on in the world and politics and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like everyone, you have to remember everyone is human, and it's like you can change people's perspective, and that could make bigger change beyond just like the small things that you're trying to do personally. So that's kind of my perspective there, but I think it's like totally a balancing act. Like, there's obviously people who are like stuck in their ways and maybe you don't collaborate with them. And I've seen clients, and we've had to do this ourselves, where you have to draw a line in the sand. Like, you don't work with those people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can give someone a chance, but my biggest strength and weakness is that I see the best in people. And so that's led me down some of the darkest holes I've been in. And that's led me to, where I'm at today. So yeah, it's just about learning when to draw that line in the sand. And like, I think it's worth, as a company, like having that hard conversation internally to know when those situations come up, like when to do it.
Yeah.
I hope it answers your question. I kind of went off there.
It does. And I think it also, when I getting to know you and getting to know PufCreativ and speaking with different people, Chelsea and Cam and, everybody, I know there's a specific type of community that you kind of cultivated because everybody is very much about healing over harm. That's something I've heard you mention before, I think in different interviews in different spaces. And even mentioning now that there's going to be a specific type of client that you refuse to work with that other agencies might, because you're drawing that line. So how do you handle that, I guess, tension when a potentially like massive client comes in, but has a culture that contradicts how you, show and profess that you care about community-centered interests? Like, what do you how do you like balance that? I know sometimes you say you just walk away, but like, how does that kind of happen?
Well, I feel like everything's situational, right? Like there's situations where like really early on, there's a red flag and we just avoid it. Like we'll be maybe in the middle of like a sales process. And then someone's like, maybe it's me or maybe it's, someone else in the sales team. And they're like, hey, like they said like this on the call. And like, that's a little bit weird, right? It's like, that is a little bit weird. Like, I don't want to risk that causing issues with my team down the line. And same thing, like, there's also like, say it's, a female on my team's like, yeah, that was a little bit creepy. It's like, man, I don't want to have my team working with someone who's like a creep. But there's times when we get tricked, right? I mean, it's one thing to talk to someone and go through a sales process with someone. It's another thing to actually have someone be paying you and open up their real communication channels. And that's where I've learned the most lessons, is having those tough conversations of like drawing a line in the sand. And I have to do that all the time. Not all the time, but like more than you think. Like have the hey, like it's just not working out. I'm really sorry. And those are not the funnest conversations to have, but like, again, like end of the day, I need to preserve my team and maintain that flow state, because if I don't have that and I don't have my team's buy-in, then I don't have anything in my mind. We've learned lessons over the years though, like on our inquiry form, like we have certain questions on there that kind of are telling. Are you like, do you do CSR as one of them? And it's like, if someone doesn't fill that out, it's like, all right, like,
Yeah.
like what? Why didn't you fill that out? Like,
Right.
sometimes they don't know what it means, or like, corporate social responsibility, or there's a couple other questions in there too that are a little bit telling. So, and then also in like the sales process, asking certain questions, trying to catch a vibe.
Yeah.
That's helpful, but yeah, like you get tricked, and things change. People's perspective changes, relationships change. Yeah, I would say that like we're very, I would say very reasonable and very open to communication and like working things out, whether it's like early on in the life cycle with a client, or after years of working together and stuff like that. So
yeah. And I think with Puff as a brand, I think with a lot of people that you've partnered with or worked with, I mean, it's very clear that authenticity is really going to be a pivotal point in the relationship. Like, you're going to have to show up as your authentic self, because like you said, it's going to come out at some point, whether it's after more money is involved, or after more meetings, or something is said as an aside that they hope that you didn't catch. Like, there's going to have to be some authenticity that kind of bubbles up to the surface, and that authenticity is going to affect how that person or that company or that organization shows up in the community, and that's going to be about how the community treats them and how they see them. I think that one of the things that I wanted to ask you as well was, when you advocate for a company that you work with, or an organization, or whatever type of partner that you work with, and you say you need to go where the community is, you need to meet them where they are as who you are authentically, and not putting on some airs that you're not. Does that require a kind of ego death for a brand? So I guess what I'm asking is, like, how do you convince a potential vendor or partner or client that you're working with that they're not the main character of the story, even though they may think they are, because they're hiring you to bring them more visibility, to hopefully increase their revenue, but maybe their focus really needs to be their relationship to the community, and maybe that's going to be how they see that increase that they're looking for. Like, how do you convince a business that
it's sometimes there's a tough conversation that needs to be had. And funny enough, you brought up ego-driven marketing, and we're actually writing an entire content piece on ego-driven marketing versus performance-driven marketing, and how do you overcome that? Because a lot of people waste money and time on ego-driven marketing, and it doesn't do anything for them. I would say that everyone is in their own unique situation, right? There are situations where I would say leaning into a founder or the founders makes sense to be part of the brand, the story, because of the actual story itself, right? How you get to there, of what route to take, is going through a formal process, and that's what leads to the conversation of like, hey, this is bigger than you. And you can do that through going through a formal process and actually having that person who maybe has the ego that's getting in the way to fill out and write down on paper the actual what they're trying to get done. And that's where you kind of find that balance. But we've totally had to have some of those tough conversations too, of like, hey, there's like a way bigger opportunity here than like just you. And I think that branding and marketing and authenticity, it's like, that's a really hard thing, is to find that balance between all of it. Like, how involved do the founders get? Or, what is going to be our main focus at the end of the day? Like, what is the cornerstone of this brand? Because one thing that people do like to see in terms of like what performs well and what builds a relationship with a community is people do like to see who's behind it. Like, I feel like for like Peake ReLeaf, for example, like I feel like people really like to see like your team and like what you guys have going on. And but like, where do you draw the line? And that's a conversation and something that really needs to be mapped out like early on, in my opinion, because if you don't map it out or have those tough conversations early on, it really does cause problems down the line. We literally have been in conversations even recently, like showing people like 10 to 20 times, a return on their investment, but they're like, nope, like we're going to put this into some random spend that like they can't even track, so um yeah, formal process I think is the name of the game, and a lot of people don't go through it.
Yeah.
Is what we've discovered.
So even within that formal process, have you ever had an instance where you encountered a brand that literally had to evaluate and kind of change their story as they went through that process because they came to an understanding that how they originally presented themselves wasn't the actual authentic?
Yeah. Yeah, and what the coolest part is that people will come to that conclusion themselves. Like again, like a lot of people have this business idea and like it's an idea and they think it's one thing, but when you ask them the right questions and they start writing down things on paper, they will be like, oh, like I'm thinking about this a different way now that I'm seeing this like written out. There's other times where, yeah, like we'll maybe have to point that out to them in like a very respectful and like playful way. Like this may not be the best route to take for you guys, considering like where you're at or who you are, like the reality of like your actual situation from a community standpoint, but also even like a competitive standpoint. Like this is going to waste time and money. Like you need to think about that now. And honesty is a really valuable thing when it works. Sometimes it can put a bad taste in people's mouths. So, and we've been in both of those situations, which helps everyone grow. The person, hopefully, and us too. We learn maybe a better way to present that information or add an additional question to how we onboard people or things like that. So,
yeah. Have you kind of talking about that theme of like growth and kind of understanding throughout that process that there may be some change that's required of the brand to present themselves authentically. In an industry where everyone's kind of obsessed with looking perfect and winning, how has your time in the industry taught you to kind of embrace, and even, working with some clients that maybe it didn't work out, and the wins and the losses that we talked about earlier, how has that kind of taught you to embrace that sometimes failure is required for authentic growth? And maybe that failure is required for a brand to know maybe we weren't telling our story the way that we should. Maybe that was a failure on our part that's leading us to grow better in the way that we're supposed to, that we can present ourselves authentically.
I mean, I think it's probably the most important thing. Like it is required. There's 1% of all businesses have not failed at some point, right? There's a few people who have gotten lucky out there and just got successful, walked into it, happen to have that crazy idea that why didn't we think of that 30 years ago? But it's few and far between. And you need to, if you're going to get into any business, and especially in cannabis, you need to be able to get used to looking at yourself in the mirror and having really tough conversations, no matter what, but what vertical you're in, whether it's retail, brand, agency, ancillary.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's required to grow really no matter what, and I've learned to embrace them. Those situations, like I used to be a little bit scared, and I used to also like let emotion get in the way of those types of conversations and that growth, because sometimes again you need to own up to it. Like you made the mistake, like you gotta not make that mistake again. And I would suggest people, like the more comfortable they are with like embracing those type of situations, like the better off they're going to be with their business and just with life. Low expectations, high vibes. You can always have a conversation. The conversation can fix like a lot of problems. From my experience, a lot of things get like lost in the sauce without like a real conversation around things. So
Yeah. I mean, I think we're very much in a society where real conversations are becoming less and less prevalent because people are unwilling to sit in being uncomfortable and being vulnerable and be confronted, like you said, needing to look in the mirror and kind of assess where they might be failing, where they might be falling short, or where they need to actually grow.
Yeah.
So I wonder, how that even translates to how you communicate with brands. Like, do you communicate with them like, is there may be some failure that is required on your part for this project to be successful? I mean, obviously maybe not framing it in that way, but do you feel like you've had to communicate, like you might have to fail a
Yeah.
little bit for us to get through this?
I mean, I'm in a situation right now where, someone is like really questioning what we're doing and we're killing it for them, which is really strange. It's a really weird situation, but they're like, we want to do this, ourselves. And like, there's not really a point in paying for this. And so like, we'll do it. And it's like, go ahead,
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
go ahead. Yeah.
Right.
Let's take a look in 3 months and see, what happens. And, we're in those situations like, a lot. The coolest part is that a lot of people over the past few years who we've been in those situations with, or maybe even just left, they come back. It's crazy. Like, it's really cool to see. So yeah, like having that conversation with someone like early on is like dependent. Like it's really, yeah, it's like really hard to be like, this could fail or this might not work, but, it really depends. Like most of the stuff that we're doing is like fixing problems and like avoiding problems for our clients.
Hmm.
So it's more of like, I would say we're always trying to avoid taking chances and like saving time. But I would say there is maybe some situations where, like we're pushing boundaries with maybe social media, right? And like not getting flagged. And it's like, this is a risk, same thing with like advertising too, we do like Google and like meta advertising, which, really shouldn't be doing in cannabis, but we set up everything safely. We get accounts shut down, we get other accounts back up, and it's still a risk for everyone. You never know how these bigger companies are going to react. So, in these situations, but like I feel like the years have been in the industry, and like most of my experience has just been all about these lessons learned, like learning the technology, learning what not to do on social media, learning how to get the ads through, how to keep things safe. Like that's really the value that I try to provide to people, is like that experience and like those lessons learned. But yeah, definitely have been in so many conversations that are just like tough and like really weird. I never thought I would be in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the ones that you grow the most from, which is the coolest part.
Yeah. Yeah. And with some of the things that you've done, I know we've worked with you in a lot of ways to, again, try to not evaluate where the line is, but evaluate how we can be creative within the regulations that we have. Because there's
Yeah,
definitely a chokehold on creativity sometimes. It can feel that way when it comes to regulatory input and compliance and things like that. And one of the things that I'm appreciative is to have a collaborative partner like you all in PufCreativ, in that there isn't no, maybe we shouldn't do that. It's more like, okay, well, you have an idea. Let's see how we can figure that out. Let's see how we can
yeah,
explore that. Let's see how we can extrapolate some actionable steps from that. This is what we can do. This is how we can evaluate success. So I really appreciate that, because I think a lot of times with a business, or not a business, but an industry that feels like sometimes it was founded on vibes as opposed to, like a lot of measurable things. Sometimes it can feel
totally.
like, are we over optimizing? Is there a danger in that? Can we measure a brand so much that we kill its magic? But I feel like with you all and working with you all, there's definitely a balance in terms of like, no, we can measure the magic. We can find out where that sweet
Yeah,
spot is, and we don't have to be so afraid of those vibes. We can, actually translate that into a strategy. So I really
totally.
appreciate that in terms of working with you all and seeing
Yeah,
how.
I mean that's like our big thing is like, I would say overall our team's like a little bit younger. Like everyone is kind of a consumer in their own way. Everyone does, have their own hobbies and interests. Everyone is, kind of in it for the right reasons. And I think when you take strategic creative and strategic performance marketing and cannabis tech and infuse it with those aspects and those traits is when you get the best results. So I appreciate that, man. That's really our whole angle, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it's very evident even from like the first meeting. I've spoken with different agencies over the years and even worked for a few before coming aboard with Peake ReLeaf, and it's very refreshing when you have a conversation that is, just a little bit more open and a little bit more transparent and a little bit more like, this isn't just about making money. Which again, when we talk even prior to recording, we talked about the importance of revenue and making money because you need those resources to actually build and to grow. But there has to be some level of like, how are you going to help us be who we are authentically? And how is that going to help us translate that into marketing strategy, business growth, revenue building? But like, again, just trying to be as authentic as possible. So it's refreshing to have a conversation with you and be like, oh, that's the basis. Like, we're going to be authentic. And it may be uncomfortable sometimes, but that's what authenticity is.
I mean, I feel like we see really solid results with you guys because we both have good intentions, like in everything that we're doing. And like, we provide systems and structure and data and design and all the things, but you guys tie that all together with your approach and your efforts. Like, that's when we see the best results, is when that authenticity and that community connection is really there. Like that's what makes the difference. Like that's what strangely enough, like that's awesome. It's awesome that like AI and like the future of search and algorithms are seeing those things, and people, the ones who are going to get cut are going to be the ones who aren't leaning into that type of approach.
Yeah.
Which I find to be a beautiful thing in the world of nerdy SEO and search and like algorithms and AI. There is some like cool stuff behind the scenes going on,
Yeah. I remember, when SEO was like just keyword stuffing. Like that was like like a little like
spammy backlinks. Yeah.
But to see how it's grown and to see how, even within the past several years, how it's evolved and changed with the implementation of AI for a lot of people becoming the replacement in search, not just because they find it more convenient to get more like targeted results in that way, but because it's being pushed at the forefront. Like you're seeing it above, organic search results. You're seeing it implemented with everything. You're seeing, if you want to search for something via Google, more than likely, if you're kind of in that whole ecosystem and you're really involved in it and you're using Gemini and your email and everything else, it's going to pull from a wealth of different aspects of your digital profile to give you some sort of targeted results. Pluses and minuses with that, it can be really convenient, but it can also feel a little 1984-ish. So it kind of depends on which direction you want to go. But, with, continued kind of growth in all the different marketing avenues that we see, I mean, what are some of the things that you're kind of looking to when it comes to how PufCreativ implements marketing strategies for like clients you work with?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is like right now, a lot of it's been about leveraging technology and normalizing the marketing process, because the weird thing about cannabis is like a lot of the performance and how you can take deep data and stuff like that is based on your tech stack. And so our goal this year specifically is to really be able to track like the full lifetime value of a customer. So it's like, we captured them here, we got them into the retention marketing, loyalty campaigns here, and here's how they perform day to day. They left, here's how we got them back again. Then you track that way. And that's a hard thing to do because there's so many tech stacks and each tech stack has its own capabilities. And, so that's like where I think the direction we're heading in. The big thing this year is like where we've been is like getting that as close to the reality of what we're reporting on for our clients with like what the reality is of the capabilities of the tech that we're working with. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's a big emphasis. Like, one of the bigger things that we're seeing is like we're acquiring customers for people through SEO, ads, social, things like that. But then, after the first or fourth visit, like that customer never comes back again because there's not like a really strong retention strategy in place. There's not like automated flows. And so really leaning into like that whole thing of like the retention side on our end from a digital perspective, but then even taking it to like using that data to help with like in-store recommendations, like, hey, you know, you're losing them in store because of this. Like maybe we should do this to fix that problem. So really letting the data tell the story and really trying to like just keep tracking things better and better is like the main goal over here. The big thing is like if you're investing into that type of performance marketing, you might as well build a great brand. That's the whole thing. The better the brand, the better the creative. That's when you're maximizing your spend on the performance side. And that's a perspective that I think people really need to have.
With everything, you know, with like AI and automation, you know, what's like an old school service habit that you believe is like the secret weapon for like marketing strategies?
Email marketing. It's like super old school, but like nothing beats it. Like you own your list. It's like a direct way to communicate with people. If you can get like your domain health right and your deliverability right and follow the rules of the platform, like you can make a lot of money off email marketing no matter what your business is. But folks don't know how to get people to sign up for emails. Folks don't know how to like, you know, really work on deliverability rates and the strategy there. You know, don't realize the power of design in email marketing. So, you know, that's a really, you know, old trick of the trade that I don't think is going away anytime soon. Mobile apps are really cool. You know, they work for a lot of people. They add a layer of like expense and time to something that could be already working on like the email and even like text message side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets deep, like, you know, but everyone's in this unique situation with budget, their tech stack, their internal capabilities, you know, so that's like the big thing is like, you know, wrapping your head around all of that.
Yeah. And even with like the tech stack, I mean, it's I know when the industry first kind of kicked off here in Maryland, it was like there was a lot of companies that were coming from outside the cannabis industry that were trying to kind of shoehorn their tech solution to fit a cannabis market without really understanding some of the nuances, understanding some of the operating, you know, workflows or hurdles. And they were just like, oh, here's something that worked in another industry, in another vertical. We're going to try and make it work for you know, the cannabis industry. You know, with some of the tech stacks that you've worked with, that you've experienced, some of those sort of developers, you know, how crucial has it been to get, you know, a client that you've worked with on board with like a tech stack that it was actually constructed for the industry as opposed to them using a solution from outside of the industry?
Yeah, I think it's really crucial to the success of the client. It's a weird situation where, you know, we could guide them in the right direction, but like they're going to do what's best for them at the end of the day. So the least I can do is like be honest with them about what I think is going to perform best. The issue is that like it's always changing too. Like all these companies are like releasing updates and, you know, new capabilities and stuff like that. So it's like you really kind of have to, I would say, be thoughtful and mindful in that decision and talk to someone like us to land on what's best for your operation. Because we're going to give you the best advice from a marketing perspective, but there's other things that come into play with the tech stack, like the operation and like what works best for the cost. So it's definitely a big conversation to have and something that doesn't get as thought into as it really should be for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, John, I could keep talking to you.
Same, man. I know.
Like we were talking before, even we started recording. But I know we're coming up on a little bit on time, but I wanted to ask you like two more questions, if I could. One being, what is the one question about the human experience of being a CEO in this industry that no one has ever asked you, but keeps you up at night?
Just how hard it is. No one really gets into that. Yeah. It's like it's very difficult to be at the end of the day, you know, if things go wrong, it's on you. You know, that keeps me up. A lot of these situations that other people like wouldn't even, they're just like, whatever, like screw that person. But nope, keeps me up. You know, why were they rude, or
Yeah.
why is that their perspective, or why is my teammate, feeling this way about this? And it's a really tough role to be in. I've never been a CEO before. That's also another thing. I've been in leadership roles, but I'm kind of writing the book as I'm going and doing it in my own like unique way. But I guess it's working in some type of way, to be having a conversation like this.
Yeah, man.
But
Absolutely.
I'm always a student too.
Yeah. And, that's part of what keeps the business and how it operates, I think, honest. I mean, to admit that you're still always in the position to learn, that just because you're at the top level in terms of leadership of a company, that's where it stops, that there's no more development that should happen creatively, personally, professionally, mentally, whatever the case may be. So being able to say, yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm kind of the spearhead of a company. I work with all these people. All these people work under me, whatever the hierarchy may be. I'm not done learning so that I can show up as authentic as I need to for my own personal success, for my own personal growth, and for the growth of the company. So I think that's dope. I think it's dope to continue to have that perspective. And there's a reason why you guys keep winning awards, man. There's a reason why, people within the team are considered thought leaders in the areas that they work in. I think if you continue to build that sort of environment where people feel comfortable and feel supported in their professional growth, you're going to see them take off, and they're not going to feel a need to grow in spite of your leadership, but because of it, because you've contributed to it. Not to just say,
Exactly.
I'm going to grow because they're not letting me grow. No, it's very different. It's clear to see with PufCreativ that people are growing because they're given the space to grow, that they're given the way to grow in a way that's meaningful to them. So, I applaud you, man. I applaud,
Thanks,
everything
man.
you all are doing, because everybody's not like that. Whether it's
It's hard. It's harder, man. It's a harder way to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I appreciate that. And my last question is, so when's the band coming to Baltimore, man?
Honestly, man, we were talking about doing an East Coast thing this summer. I gotta, some family health stuff, so I think I'm going to be in Jersey a lot.
Okay.
I got a lot of family around your zone in Baltimore, Maryland area, and a lot of family in Delaware too. A lot of connections, so it could be a reality this year, man. I'll definitely let you know. I appreciate that.
Please do, man. Please do. NCF is coming up.
True.
It would be dope to see Booble on the card, man. Like, it would be dope. It would be dope. That's all I'm saying. I can put you in contact with the folk over at NCF if you need to, if you need somebody to advocate for the band being on the card. So just keep me posted.
Okay, I'm down, man. You tell me.
But yeah, man, I appreciate you taking the time, man. I know that
Sure.
The time is valuable, and then, like you said, 7 to 9 calls a day. So I don't take the opportunity to speak with you and kind of pick your brain about all these things for granted.
Appreciate it, man.
So
Yeah,
I'm really,
same.
really appreciative of that. And again, I'm really thankful for the relationship that Peake, ReLeaf, and PufCreativ have built over the years. And
Damn.
Yeah, man, it's only going to continue to grow.
I agree, Kev. I appreciate you having me, man. Seriously.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.